Hello to all the viewers out there. Welcome back to Creation ModCon. Whether you stuck with us this far or you're just now tuning into the stream, thanks for coming. You have made it to this year's fan writing contest, and I am Harry DeLuca, your contest host. Joining me today are some of my fellow writing panelists who you may recognize if you were just tuned in earlier. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves real quick, just for any of our new viewers? Arcane?
Hey everybody, I'm Arcane Impact. I'm a writer on Beyond Skyrim, Iliac Bay, Elsewhere, and Roscria.
Hello, I am Argor. I'm the one of the art and writing directors on Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil, and a writer on Argonia.
Hello everyone, I'm Basaldin. I am a writer on Beyond Skyrim Roscria, as well as its narrative director and claims director.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm on the Arcane University as a game writing teacher and writer and editor on Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil. So that's me. Welcome to all of the panelists. So we asked you guys to submit your best original Elder Scrolls literature, all the viewers out there. That means anything the player can pick up and read in game, basically, whether that be books, notes, journals, poetry, whatever you wanted. Well, maybe not whatever you wanted, because we did put some restrictions on the submissions. It had to be in English, less than 500 words, and fit on one page. But that said, I think all of the submissions did a really nice job working with those restrictions. Because we've read through all of them. Everyone here, including myself, has kind of brought with them their favorite submission. And you can consider these submissions our contest finalists, essentially. So congratulations to any and all of the finalists. You may have been spoiled already through our testful in the chat. That is a test, not the final. We will be voting at the end. Well, we'll get to that. But for each finalist, we're basically going to briefly explain why we brought the piece that we did. Basically what stuck out to us, stuff like that. And then we're going to listen to one of our talented voice actors give a dramatic reading of that finalist to really let the content of the piece sink in. But you all, this is the voting part, the viewers out there in the world are basically going to vote on who you think deserves to win this contest. So chat will be deciding the winner of this contest. We just bring the work. We've read through them all. We chose the ones we thought would be we thought you guys would enjoy, and you will be deciding the winner. So we brought some fantastic works with us today, so make sure you pay attention so you can vote on who you liked best. Whoever wins this contest will have their book implemented into any of the relevant projects, Beyond Skyrim, Skyblivion, and Skywind. And even if you don't win, we highly encourage all of our finalists to apply, as you are all very talented writers. Anyways, that's a lot of stuff. Let's just get into this contest, shall we? Arcane. We'll start with you. Whose work did you bring, and why'd you bring it? What stuck out to you?
Yeah, I thought we had a lot of strong contenders with this contest, but my choice was Astride a Strider by Quartus Miras, which was written by, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, I believe it's Fyodor von Keporkic. In any case, I think one of the best ways to immediately engage a player with these like short form pieces of writing is to have a strong character voice, a strong voice in your writing. And that's something that this story does very, very well. As well as like just being able to tell a very small story that's still interesting that I think can fit basically anywhere in any of the projects.
Yeah, personality is super important in any lore piece. So I'm excited to hear. We got our sound guy listening in, JGT. So go ahead and play that voiceover for everyone out there.
Astride a Strider by Quartus Miras.
And we'll tune into
On the
stream.
15th day of my journey through Vardenfell, I finally decided to climb aboard one of the enormous beasts of burden the natives call silt striders. The Dunmer at the Strider port in Aldrun seemed as ill-disposed toward me as many of his brethren, but he accepted my coins willingly enough. I have heard tales of the way those insect-like animals are driven, dear reader, but it was as fascinating as it was revolting to see with my own eyes. The caravaner quite literally pulls at the exposed nerve tissue at the back of the strider with his own hands, acting with such finesse and precision that I would not be surprised were the strider to break out in a tribal dance, should its master wish it to. I inquired whether there are still wild striders roaming the plains. The caravaner simply pointed to a large oval structure half buried in the ground. Puzzled, I watched as we passed it by, and suddenly I understood. It was an empty husk of a strider long gone, the tough outer shell the only proof that such a beast was ever there. We stopped in Margan and continued on toward Kul, making use of the Banidad Foyada. My map showed no passage through the northern part of the mountains, yet judging by the smirk on the caravaner's face when I questioned him, striders have little need for official roads. The weather seemed merely cloudy to me, but the Dunmers aboard the strider seemed uneasy, watching the sky as if it might open up and swallow us whole. It almost did. I have heard of the so-called ash storms, of course, but in my understanding, such occurrences were limited to the Red Mountain region. Alas, dear reader, I was wrong. Those would be the blight storms, a much more dangerous phenomenon, but even an ordinary storm of ash and sand is enough to make an experienced traveler like me wary, as I learned. Howling gray clouds with the occasional cliff racer trapped in the violent air currents came toward us, and I was impressed by our caravaner's skills for the second time, shielding the driving cavity with a cover likely made of the very same strider shell. He dropped a ladder down the beast's side and ordered us to get on the ground as fast as we could. Leaving only a long, thick rope leading from the strider to his waist, he led me and the 4 other passengers toward a familiar structure laying by the road. Yes, dear reader, I weathered the storm under the dead remains of another strider. Just before the storm hit, and it became nearly impossible to hear one another, I asked our guide whether the terrible weather posed any danger to our own insectoid beast. His answer? "Why do you think we chose them, Outlander?"
That was awesome. I really like the caravaner in that piece. I feel like it's very like he has a very heavy personality, even though he doesn't talk much.
Mm-hmm. They really bring some extra character to, these things, these people that we saw in Morrowind, but didn't really get to see how they work.
Yeah,
And
and the
there's
Silt Strider stuff is awesome. I love how it's describing how they work essentially, and what happens to them after they die and stuff like that. It's super interesting, really cool perspective.
Yeah, the Dunmer and Morrowind have always had this culture and atmosphere to them that's so different than anything else that we're used to in fantasy. So it's always really fun to see something in the world where it's a piece written from someone who also isn't used to it, kind of experiencing it, and it's easy for us to kind of slip into that moment along with them.
Totally, yeah. So that was a Strider. Um, Great submission. But we got to get through them all. So let's see who Arger brought to the table. Arger, why don't you talk about your piece a bit?
Yeah. My finalist was Entombed by Devon, and it was also a Morrowind story. I found it enrapturing because it was a story of a young Dunmer woman who was describing kind of the ancestral history and culture of the Dunmer, and it's so fascinating to read this kind of stuff because even in the world of the Elder Scrolls, some of Dunmer practices are alien even to the denizens of the world. I really liked the way the setting was described. It was very there was a lot of sensory information, and it was very descriptive. So I could hear the sounds, and I could smell the ash in the air. And when it came to the climax of the story, you could feel the tension in the room. And on top of that, I think the last thing I would say would be that when I was reading it, it felt like a lore book that was already in game. So really good job in capturing the voice that Bethesda uses.
All right. Well, let's see how it pans out. JGT, you can go ahead and run the clip for us.
Entombed. At the base of the Red Mountain, the ancestors lay entombed. Her mother made the trip every day, carrying a box of offerings up from the farmstead to the stone arch entrance embedded into the rocky slope. "Join me," she'd sometimes ask. "Your father misses you. Don't you want to see him?" The girl always refused. "I don't remember, father." Which was a lie. She remembered his smile, his soothing bedtime prayers, the sweetened salt rice pudding he'd make for her name day. She remembered the Kaguti attack, the disease left in his leg, slowly eating him away. She remembered wheezing breath emanating from the locked bedroom, and silence when it stopped. She remembered the cremation, the procession up to the tomb, the darkness within, shifting shadows, overwhelming whispers, moving toward her, and her screams as she fled back into the sunlight. "Another day," she'd assure her mother. Always another day. Then there were no other days. They were working the fields when they felt the impact. A flash of light from the south and a boom so loud it left their ears soundlessly ringing. Then everything started shaking. They ran inside. Supplies were frantically packed, shelves and crates ransacked in the process. Her mother slung the sack over the girl's shoulder, pushed her toward the door, and shouted, "Run to the tomb. I'll pack the rest and meet you there. Don't look back." The girl ran up the rocky slope, storm clouds and fire belching out above her. She reached the tomb door, slammed it shut behind her, and cowered in the darkness, whispering shadows on one side and muted destruction on the other. Hours passed. Then voices outside the door. The gruff voices of strangers, panicked and desperate. The girl hid, and they barged in. Their skin was blistered, their fingertips charred, their eyes wild. They tore open her supplies and scooped up the ancestral offerings, and when she protested, they grabbed her, threatening her with scorched blades. Behind them, the whispers loudened. Shadows stretched out from the walls. Sunken eyes, bony fingers, cloaked in darkness. When the strangers turned, it was too late. The girl curled up, waited, and then it was over. "Don't worry," her father murmured. "You're safe now." A week later, once the quakes had subsided and the rock around the door had cooled, the girl ventured out. The burning winds howled against her hood and face mask, but she pushed on, reaching the ruins of the farmstead. A few urns had survived intact, and she packed the supplies within, but that wasn't why she was there. After her mother's cremation, she scattered the ashes in the pit beside her father's. Shadows embraced, reunited. Then they guided her hands, murmured the incantations in her ears, stitching flesh and weaving words. The 4 blistered corpses were gone from the entrance of the tomb. The rituals were complete, and 4 bone walkers now stood, guarding the family and their echoed halls for the dark days that lay ahead.
Oh, it's kind of unsettling. Morrowind's a creepy place.
Chills.
I love how palpable the melancholy in the tone of that writing is.
Yeah. The ancestor stuff is really just super cool, because while it's in the real world, it's kind of like a scary idea to be almost taken care of by your past loved ones who are no longer on this earth. But like in the Dunmer culture, it's like revered. It's really cool.
It's funny because it reminds me of like some Hispanic cultures who kind of share similar like theologies in that way, which is just a testament to the different representations like of each culture. Dunmer are definitely included in that.
Yeah, you're right. There are some crossovers. Super good.
One thing I did like about this story especially was that it really feels like it could fit in all three projects as well, because it's kind of timeless.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I agree for sure.
Well, I will move on to the piece which I chose. The piece I chose, one that stuck out to me while reading through submissions, was Of Our Merrick Cousins by Tony Christofferson, I believe is how you say his last name. Really well written and paced, I felt. It's very comfortable. It fit within the word limit, like very comfortably, Some submissions were running, over a bit, and but it seemed like Tony, when he wrote this, he kind of like knew how much time he needed, or like how much space he needed, if that makes any sense. The content itself is kind of like Thomwar propaganda, basically. But what I appreciated about it the most, I think, is that the origin of the book itself makes like a lot of sense. It has an author, and the author has like a place in society. So it's written by this guy named Valderel, an Altmer, presumably, who is a sapiarch of foreign observations at the College of Sapiarchs in Lilandril, which is in Somerset Isles. It's really funny because it's like overly, it's like just oozing with that kind of Altmer energy. Like we're so fantastic, but maybe these other races can be fantastic with us, which in a way it's kind of progressive. Anyway, I won't say any more about it because I think he'll do a better job saying it than I do. Why don't you go ahead and play the audio for us, JGT?
Of Our Merrick Cousins by Valdorel of Lilandril, Sapiarch of Foreign Observations. As the territories and influence of our dominions spread across Tamriel, we must never grow so complacent that we echo the flaws of the empire of men. A specific and fundamental failure of the empire was to spread their meager resources too thinly, making their governance of the continent ineffective and the loss of their holdings unavoidable. While the birthright of the Altmer as saviors of Mer and the rightful rulers of all Tamriel is clear, we must recognize that our numbers are not infinite. We must look to our Merrick cousins not solely as a source of labor and conscripts, but as attendants and viceroys who will impose our edicts abroad. Our Bosmer associates have shown us loyalty. Being of kindred lineage, they shall reap the bounty of their oaths and share in the spoils of our conquest. But there exist others of Aldmer descent, distant relatives long exiled who may yet be valuable to us if they prove willing and reliable. I speak of the Dunmer of Morrowind and the Orsimer of Orsinium. While these outcast Mer have committed blasphemies against our heritage in the distant past, it is clear that the gods have wrought continual hardship and suffering upon them as punishment for their transgressions. Forged by torment, they may yet return as prodigal children and be of benefit to the Dominion. Of the Dunmer, their pride has been humbled by the fury of Red Mountain. Many possess skills and knowledge tempered by Morrowind's hardships that are of particular usefulness. Specifically, the mages of House Telvanni are of reasonable disposition, open to diplomacy when it is of mutual benefit, second only to we Altmer in the ways of magic, and skilled in managing the thraldom of men. When the glorious day arrives that the reach of the Dominion extends far from pristine Alinor to the eastern shores of Tamriel, They may be of use in forcing our will. Of the Orsimer, since the Merethic, we have looked upon them as little more than beasts and savages. While this is still true for many of them, study the history of thrice-sundered Orsinium, and you will find a hungry spark remains for their Meric origins. With each cycle of ruin, a growing number of them turn away from the pretender Malakath and remember their faith in noble Trinimac. Moreover, their disdain grows for the men of Hammerfell and the inadequate half-breeds of High Rock. With proper guidance, the fourth Orsinium may yet rise as a repentant vassal of the Dominion. Our ascendance is at hand. Those who submit to our wisdom and partake of our generosity may yet hold station within our Dominion.
Yeah, that one has.
Gotta love the accent.
That accent really made it.
Yeah.
It's great.
You gotta love that.
Oh, sorry.
I think that came from the. I think that came from the attention to detail of the author. To be honest,
Yeah. I love how this is a great example of you don't necessarily have to agree with your characters when you write them. And this is a wonderful this character would probably be a villain in an Elder Scrolls game, but they write them, and the way that they write them makes so much sense. It definitely makes sense to this character.
I can just imagine this just on a table somewhere in the Thalmor Embassy in Skyrim. You just pick it up and you're like, who's this guy talking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's so enjoyable to read it and see this other perspective.
Thalmor carrying this around in Cyrodiil, kind of spreading the good word, the Aldmer pantheon. It's really interesting.
Have you heard the good news about the Dominion?
Yeah, our ascendance is at hand.
Reality
of the High Elves and their Dominion.
Anyway, I really liked it. There was we were talking a lot about personality before. Personality is it doesn't necessarily have to be comical. It just has to be something that's you can feel the narrator as if you're talking to them. It's really interesting. I thought this one had a lot of that. So I think though we got to move on. Let's move on to Visauden. What did you whose piece stuck out to you the most?
Of the group of pieces that I read, my finalist is The Great Doggy of Senchal by Joe Craghill. And I chose this one because one of my favorite types of lorebook that you can find in the Elder Scrolls are those little pieces of folklore that are sprinkled throughout that you can imagine them being stories carried from one person to another over time. And this one definitely stood out to me through both the story itself and some of the hyperbole and some of the lost details to be one of those stories that really fits in with the setting and some of the unreliable narrator and some of the just small stories that are sprinkled throughout the setting. I thought that fit in perfectly with the Elder Scrolls, and so I really thought that it was a really good piece to put in as a finalist. So I'm really excited for you to hear it today.
All right, well, I'm excited too. Let's take a listen, shall we? Go ahead and run the clip, JGT.
The Great Dagi by Thalos Oakhollow. On one especially wonderful evening in Third Era 433, the markets of Senchal were alive with the evening rush of Khajiit and other folk. The two moons sat low over the horizon, and the sky was dressed in beautiful purple-red silk. The mood was jovial. Folk sang songs of old, and others clapped and danced along. All appeared well. However, a dark force was shifting in oblivion. Not one citizen could imagine the horror that the night would bring. All of a sudden, amid the crowds, large spider-leg-like columns pierced up through the paved streets, bringing with them a large oval of yellow and red. Secunda and Masser watched on stoically in a sea of blood as the jaws of oblivion opened. Out of Mehrunes' mouth spilled his loyal servants. With them came death and destruction, the magnitude of which had not been seen by the citizens of Senchal. The bravest and brightest the city could offer fell to the Daedra. Nevertheless, not all hope was lost, for sometimes the darkest of circumstances call upon the most unlikely of heroes. This defender was not of the races of men, nor of the elves, but a Khajiit, a Dagi to be more specific. Her true name is not remembered, but she was known among the local thieves as the Grey Cat. She sneaked by the bloodthirsty Daedra and valiantly stepped over the corpses of Senche and Palmer, equipped only with a small dagger. The city guard began their final stand as the Grey Cat was swallowed into the Deadlands. The Daedra continued to pour out of oblivion, and the last line of defense grew thin. In the final hour, a figure emerged from the gate, holding a powerful artifact known as a sigil stone. This was, of course, the Grey Cat herself. Her fur was matted with blood, and her blade was dull. Behind her, Mehrunes snapped closed his jaws, and the Grey Cat dropped to her knees and wept. The city lay in ruin. Great fires continued late into the night, and the bodies of innocent folk piled high. However, Senchal's savior, who came from humble beginnings, had rescued her city from the mouth of Mehrunes. Her identity sunk into obscurity, but her story must never be forgotten. The Oblivion crisis claimed countless lives. However, many heroes rose from the ashes. This was the tale of one such hero. This was the tale of the great Dagi of Senchal.
I just love that last image of this unassuming, just little Khajiit with a single dagger, just completely useless by the end, saving the town. Just such a fun little story from the Oblivion Crisis.
Yeah, it's I like it so much because as someone who's played Oblivion, I never even considered like all of the havoc, that was happening all throughout Cyrodiil that you might not have even seen, and like how you're the hero of Cyrodiil, but like surely there has to be someone else, who's like uh who's doing what you're
Helping the
doing,
others,
maybe
yeah.
on a smaller scale. It's a really cool premise, and it makes you feel like stuff is happening even while you're, playing the
Yeah, it
game.
taps into the scale of the Oblivion Crisis and how many heroes there must have been during that time, even those whose names are forgotten. They're still remembered in other ways. So I love that aspect of that story.
So what you're saying is after Skyblivion releases, there'll be a Beyond Skyblivion to see all the other.
Oh God.
Okay, let's.
But yeah, it was fantastic. I like seeing those little bits of culture. We also need a lot more elsewhere books. We don't get a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
could
also,
definitely, I could see this placed in a lot of places. Stories are meant to be shared, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
one of the things I like about this story particularly is that it still, even if it's not necessarily true to history, it has the same structure of like the stories that you would tell to kids of like, this little underdog just going and saving the town against all odds.
Oh yeah, I can totally see some barkeep somewhere in Cyrodiil or even in High Rock telling the story of, oh, I heard from a trader that there was this one Khajiit that saved the town. They were the humble thief, but they were able to close an Oblivion gate, and just telling it to the little kids gathered around the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely really, awe-inspiring. Like if you're a little kid and you hear it, it's like, whoa, the Grey Cat,
Oh yeah.
I could do that.
That could be me. Yeah, exactly. Those
Who
were
needs a
that's an
history of
awesome
Dag?
story. Yeah, right. All of these pieces have been awesome to hear. Thanks to Trendane, the voice actor who made those fabulous renditions. But now that we've heard them all, how you guys feeling about your pick compared to others about the piece you brought.
It's a tough choice.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
I think
They were all
so
really
too,
good.
yeah. They're all super, super well done. But we are going to be posting the poll in the chat here in a few seconds. So take the time to think about all of the different pieces we've heard. We had a Strider, Entombed, and of our Merrick Cousins, and the Great Dagi of Senchal. So all of them have something I think unique about them and something going for them. So take it all into account. Which maybe you like the way Trendane said a certain word in one of them. We'll find out. Consider your decision carefully. We would love to have any one of these floating around the mod. And like I said before, anyone who wrote, regardless of the poll, our finalists should definitely consider applying to the Beyond Skyrim project because we'd love to have you.
And there were some other stories that didn't make the finalists that during this brief period while you all are considering your votes,
Right.
we'd like to go over several honorable mentions because there were a lot of very good stories and they couldn't all be finalists, but we'd each like to go over one that just stuck out to us briefly and just kind of discuss why. I suppose I'll go first.
Yeah, which one stuck out to you, Fasan?
I really enjoyed the Hamfist Clan Death Book by Pete Richardson. It was not as serious of a story as others, but man, it made me laugh. Like it honestly was one of the funniest things I've read in a while. It was a very humorously read book. It's definitely one of those stories about just the wheel of fortune of this one particular Nord clan just being brutal to these poor random people in Skyrim, and just the way that all of them meet these very ironic fates. It's very enjoyable, and so I think that along with a little folklore, I do enjoy it when the lore books in Skyrim and Elder Scrolls are able to give a little bit of humor in how they present themselves. So that one definitely stuck out to me.
Yeah, for my honorable mentions, the humor thing was a little bit more on my end, I think. There was, I think the second best one was kind of unassuming in that it was kind of a riff on a Kiss Sweet Mother, that book in Skyrim. But it was written as, what was it? It was written by a legionnaire who was trying to capture people who were trying to join the Dark Brotherhood. So it was kind of like a incorrect retelling of it, and it was written pretty well. It was in the time limit. The word limit. It was pretty funny. And then there's also the had a second, which it's not. I don't know. I had a second one, but it was a Nazim book. It was actually surprisingly well written, like from Nazim's perspective. But you know.
I didn't see that one. That's really funny. Mine personally was called The Attestation of a Thalmor Dissident by Nuclear Spartan. It's funny because the ones that I saw were both Thalmor related. This one was, though, it was more like the one I chose in the end was more like Thalmor propaganda. This one is more of I guess it's like anti-Thalmor propaganda. It's about this Altmer who doesn't agree with the actions that they've taken against people. They think they're too brutal and stuff like that. It was very well written. I felt like it kind of rushed to the end though, like they noticed they were reaching the word limit in the final paragraph. But it was still really, really, really good.
Don, you got all of the fun Thalmor stuff.
I guess.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Some of the stories I definitely felt like there were some that had a lot of potential to them and were just as good as the one I put as a finalist, but they just needed that one little extra pass of editing. So anyone that submitted stories for this, please apply for Arcane University or Beyond Skyrim. We'd love to have more writers with that much talent. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, there were some really strong submissions, and a lot of people kind of thinking outside of the box and working within the format, which was fun to see. My honorable mention is to a report on a meeting with a Daedroth by Scott Sutherland, which was that same kind of thinking outside of the box. It was a book that started a quest, which I felt was a harder sell as something that we would actually like put into all of our projects, just because we're not planning on that particular quest being a part of it. But the actual text itself was absolutely dripping with detail and tone, and it was all this stuff about Apocrypha and meeting up with different Daedra. It was absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, you love stories and lore books to kind of give you little insights into a larger thing that you can connect them to.
Yeah. Totally.
Some types of lore books are just a bit more harder of sells than others,
I like the ones that are kind of like esoteric and just make you think, especially in the world of the Elder Scrolls. It goes into, it allows you to explore all the different topics and stuff that you can't normally do in the game itself because of trying to make it a video game. Still has to be a video game, but at the end of the day, so the lore books help really flesh out the world, absolutely, and a lot of these did really follow that.
Yeah, and some of these, the restrictions we placed, this is almost like maybe like a single kind of, because of the length restriction, maybe some ideas aren't able to be, as fleshed out as some others. So this is just like a, we wanted to see what people could do, in a given page frame, and like I said before, I think everyone did a really nice job.
Books like these that make me want to just live in Apocrypha and just hang out and read all the books there, even if I go insane. It'd be a fun way to go out.
Right.
And speaking of, our previous talks on the writing panel, this kind of, working within this structure that we've laid out is very much, what we do as writers on Beyond Skyrim. We have to work within kind of the box that we're given.
Oh yeah, like this is this was for sure a miniature version of like how Acclaim works in Beyond Skyrim. Just like we want to put a little story into this part of the world, come up with something. It should fit this general area. It should be roughly this long, but we'll give you some freedom as to what specifically it is. And there's a lot of freedom there, limitations for sure, but you could come up with some really fun stuff with those just rough limitations.
Definitely. Yeah, we try to include lore, or flavor text rather, wherever possible. I've really leaned into it recently, even if it's just a regular house with a character who lives there. They definitely have written something down at some point. What did they write about? It could be like Bethesda does like shopping lists. A lot of the time, like what's laying around this person's house? Maybe there's like a hidden love note under, like in the corner of someone's room or under their pillow. It could be anything, just any kind of flavor text that helps you characterize people more or tell you something more about the world.
One of my favorite books in Skyrim is when you go into that one bandit cave and there's a blind guy as the lookout, and you can pick up his book and it's just blank pages. And there's no
That's
reason
wonderful.
There's no reason for that to be there other than to make a joke about the fact that this blind person is reading a blank book. But it's so fun that that's there. It adds so much to the atmosphere. So you can fit books anywhere in the game, and it'll add something fun.
Oh yeah, and books are a great way to flesh out not just the world, but the characters that you're writing, like what books they have around them, what books they're reading. Mm-hmm. If a character has written a book, that says a lot about them.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think enough time has passed. People have probably gotten their chance to vote on the poll. Let's take a look. It looks like a Strider is the winner of this one.
Hey.
So
Hey.
congratulations to them.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yeah, congratulations.
Which was the writer for that again?
That was Fyodor von Kaporkek.
Congratulations to you.
Well done.
We,
I think that's a very apt one to get in game.
Yeah,
I think it easily slips into any of the projects. It's a very strong piece. Really good work all around.
Oh yeah,
they're all fantastic.
I can imagine someone having that on their desk, like this account of the far-off land of Morrowind. Very, very fun, just book to have somewhere.
You are truly the most elder of scrolls. Thank you to all of our contest participants. Truly, as Vasadin said, we got a lot of really good submissions, and Arcane University is a great place to learn more if you're interested in pursuing stuff like this. And or you can
Don't forget
just
to apply
straight to one of the projects, Beyond Skyrim specifically, because we're the only ones that really handle writing side of it. I don't think Skywind and Skyblivion are looking for that stuff as much.
There's a lot of writing to do.
Yes, there's lots to do. But that's about all we have for this time slot. We got the Beyond Skyrim walkabout starting in roughly 19 minutes. So be sure to stay tuned for that coming up next. Thanks to everyone for coming. This is your host, Harry DeLuca, signing off. Say goodbye.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks, chat.
Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, contestants.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.